And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. There's a lot to talk about today, even though it might not seem that way looking at this warnings map. That's why I paused for a second there, because just looking at the warnings map looks like overall not a lot going on across the country. We have a couple scattered flood warnings throughout the southeast, but most of that was earlier this morning. Those are going to be gone soon. And then one little winter storm warning up here in New York where we're going to get 2 to 4 inches of snow. But for the most part, this map is looking pretty blank. The place where there is some weather going on that we're going to be diving into is what's going on down here in Southern California. We're actually getting some rain, which is great when you think about the California drought, and we'll take any little bits of rain that we can get. But then that same storm is going to have different effects on Arizona. So for California, where it's bringing some nice rain, in Arizona, where we're also in a drought, that's actually just going to be bringing some extreme winds, some warm temperatures, and some low humidity. So that's why we have a fire threat to talk about there. So those are the two big stories, I would say. The rain going to SoCal and the fire threat in Arizona. But then behind that system that's bringing all of that weather, we actually have a number of other systems that are going to be coming into the west right after that. So right there, you can see that's the low that's bringing the rain to SoCal today, and then the fire threat to Arizona today as well, with the wind component of that system. And then behind it, keeping your eyes on the west here, you'll see another system come in, which we're going to have to talk about because the model changed a lot from yesterday. You can see right there, now it's looking like it'll be mostly a Northern California storm, and it's looking a lot stronger than yesterday. We'll go into exactly why that is throughout this entire video. And then, so that's the second storm. And then behind that, we have another storm that looks to be coming in around the start to midweek next week. And that looks to be actually the biggest of the three. So throughout, as I click through that, you might have noticed not a lot going on in the eastern half of the country. So we're mostly going to be focusing on the west today. So that was a rather long introduction, but I'll say what I always say. If you're only interested in one of these stories, you can go down in the comments below where I put the different timestamps for what we're going to be talking about, so you could just click directly to the region you're interested in. And then also you might want to double check to make sure this is my most recent forecast, because the weather models change, as we're going to see today when we look at that second storm that comes through. Big changes there with the weather model. So good place to start is just to look at the overall pattern of what's driving the weather across the country. Right there's that low pressure system over the southeast. We talked a lot about that yesterday because that was bringing the heavy rain to places like Georgia and South Carolina throughout this morning and into this afternoon. But I'm actually not going to be spending much time on that today, because by the time most people are watching this video, that's going to be gone. And then up here, we'll have some light snow in the northeast, and there are some wind gusts up there. But again, I think we talked enough about that yesterday. Today, we're mostly going to be focusing on the west. So the first story for the west is, again, that low pressure system. You can see it push through there, push through Southern California, and then push through Arizona as well. And you might be curious as to why there's not fire threat in both places, or why it's different outcomes from the same storm. And I would say that's because the coast of California is getting a bit more rain, and our fuels aren't as dry as Arizona. In Arizona, especially down here, that's where the fuels, as I'll show later in this video, are extremely dry, and they're getting the extreme wind gusts. It's really the wind split. In California, we're not getting that much winds. In Arizona, we're getting some 40 to 45 mile per hour gusts. So that low is going to move through. And then you'd think it would create some more weather for the eastern half of the country, but it actually doesn't do all that much before just going into the Gulf of Mexico and basically disappearing. And then behind that, there's this next system. This is the one where the models have changed significantly since yesterday's run. Yesterday's run, if you remember, as this trough came in, it broke into two pieces. Half of it went up into Canada, almost dodged Washington and went right up into Canada, and then the other half turned into another cutoff low like the one we're seeing right now, and then went into central and southern California. Now you can see that trough appears to be staying intact. And this is exactly what I was talking about yesterday. The little cutoff lows, or if the bottom of this low is going to break off like this first one certainly did right here that's going through right now, that's one of the things that I think is the hardest for the models to predict. So I'm actually not that surprised that there's been a big change since what yesterday's model was showing. So the exact timing of that one should be coming in sometime around Friday and Saturday. We'll look at the exact timing when we get into the more local maps. But right now, you can see instead of turning into a cutoff low and hitting SoCal, it looks like the trough is staying intact, and it looks like the biggest impacts will be to Northern California. And Oregon as well will be getting some pretty heavy rain and snow with all of these, or with the second two systems. So we'll be taking a local look at Oregon in addition to spots in California. And then here is the third system coming in. First thing you'll notice is that it, right off the bat, it just looks much bigger than both of the first two systems. It's digging all the way down into almost Southern California, starting all the way up here in Washington. And I think that right now looks to have the potential to be the biggest of the three storms, but that's not till this time next week. So we'll have to keep our eye on that one to see what happens there. Looking at all of this in the precipitation forecast, again, there's that heavy rain that goes through the southeast. And then there's the first low that's going to bring rain to Southern California, a little bit of rain and snow to Arizona, not enough to really help with the fire threat. The winds are a much bigger factor as the low goes through there. And then it's also going to bring some snow to states like Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. And then here's that second system coming in. You can see it hangs off the coast just like yesterday's model was showing, but then right now, or right at this period in the forecast model yesterday, this is where it broke into. Half of it went up into Canada, half of it turned into a cutoff low and hit Central California. Right now, you can see it's staying intact and moving through Oregon and Northern California, bringing what looks to be like some heavy rain and snow to those areas. And then we can continue to follow. Now, one thing to look at, and why I'm not going to be spending very much time on any other parts of the country throughout this video except for the West, is because of what happens to these systems after they move through. Here's that first one. Just brings some light rain to Oklahoma and Texas, and then it basically disappears in the Gulf of Mexico. The second one basically just disappears as well. So I think the reason for that is as it came in, it didn't look like a giant trough by any standards. So we'll see what happens when this third one comes in. Remember, that's what I think is going to be the biggest of the three. And you'll notice that once that moves across the country, that does have the potential to turn into possibly a major winter storm for the northern plains and the Midwest. So it's almost, I always like starting in the West because what happens here ends up affecting the eastern half of the country a day or two later. So those first two systems look to be relatively small, and then eastern half of the country is barely even getting them. That third one looks to be the biggest of the three, and then that's what it could be turning into by this time next week. But that's a ways off in the forecast, so we'll just have to keep our eye on that. And then I'm not going to spend any time on this one, but it actually looks like there's a fourth storm coming into California after those three. So this is exactly what I was actually hoping for. We have some we have some large rainfall deficits throughout California, certainly not helping with the drought and certainly not going to help with fire danger when it comes to next season. So I was really crossing my fingers hoping for a number of storms to come through in March, and it looks like it's working. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 storms that appear to be on the way. So if we want to just take a quick look at where the precipitation is actually going to fall, click through. That's all this morning. For the most part, that's already gone, so not spending too much time on that today. And then just backing up, here's that first system as it pushes through. Right there you see mostly just down here in Southern California, and it's really not that large of a storm. It's not a major storm by any standards. I think I'm just excited because it's been quite some time since Southern California got anything. And then you'll notice the southern parts of Arizona they're not getting very much rainfall, if even any. So that's where we have that fire threat, because we're not getting any rain. It's actually still going to be relatively dry, and the winds are going to be coming with that storm. So then, right with the second system that comes through, remember yesterday, this is the one that was just hitting Oregon and Northern California, breaking off and then hitting Central and Southern. You can see how different that map looks now. Now it looks like that second system not going to be hitting Southern California at all and bringing some rather large rainfall totals to both California and Oregon, maybe getting over 1 inch to 2 inches with that. And then with the third system, it looks like we're just going to continue to pile on the totals, especially up here right along the Oregon and Northern California coast. So we'll definitely be diving into that region especially. So looking at the snowfall, again, I mentioned 2 to 4 inches up here in New York. Not going to spend any time on that today because spent a lot of time on that yesterday. And then when we look at that snowfall coming in, there are places in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico that should be getting a few inches, nothing too major. And then as that second system comes in, you'll notice how different this looks from yesterday. Now we're actually expecting possibly up to 1 foot of snow in northern parts of California, which is much different than yesterday. Yesterday's model run had it moving again through central California and just bringing some light snow to the Sierras. Now, looks like we could be getting 1 foot by Sunday. And then when that second system pushes through, we're going to be getting even more, and that's actually going to be more widespread, bringing our totals in the Sierras up to maybe 1 foot, and then also widespread snow of over 6 inches to Idaho, Nevada, Utah, and various other states as well. So big changes in the forecast. I think that's the theme of this video. Now, when it comes to the temperature anomalies, there's a few different things I want to point out on this map. One, it's the fact that the southeast, after that low has gone through, think as the low's moving through, it's pulling down some cold air behind it from these more northern states. So the southeast has some below average temperatures throughout the day today. It looks like as we get further into the forecast, as we get into Thursday and Friday, it's going to be more mild temperatures. And then as we get into this weekend, it looks like there's a pretty clear trend going on. I'll go back to the beginning so you can see what's going on here. There's a clear above average anomaly up here in the northern parts of the country. Up here in North Dakota and South Dakota, we're 20 to 25 degrees above average. So that's the second thing I noticed. One was that we're below average in the southeast. That's because that low pulled down the cold air. The second thing I noticed is how above average we are up here in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, 20 to 25 degrees above average. And then the other thing I noticed, and it's actually showing perfectly on this map right here, is what's going on in Southern California. That is as the storm and that low pressure system moves through, it's going to be bringing some cold air with it. So we're going to get some temperatures 15 to 25 degrees below average in the southern parts of the state, even though the northern parts of the state look to be 10 to 15 degrees above average. So if we look at the highs today, this gives you a snapshot of what's going on. There's relatively warm temperatures throughout the entire country almost. An easy way to look at this map is the blue color is where there's below freezing temperatures. And you can see for our daytime highs, there's very select regions that are below freezing. It's crazy to see how different this is from the map when we'd be looking at this map 2 weeks ago when that Arctic blast of cold air was down here, and almost the entire country looked to be below freezing throughout most of the day. Quite a change. As you can see, there's now parts of Texas and Florida which are in the 60s to 70s, and that's even with some of those below average temperatures down there. So as we continue to go through, we'll look at the highs for tomorrow. Looks like a similar picture is going on. 70s and 60s throughout the southeast. It's going to be a little bit warmer than it is today because that low's already gone, not pulling down the cold air anymore. Now, something interesting to point out here, and we'll see if I can actually find it, but with those above average temperatures up there in North Dakota and South Dakota, there were actually some points on this map where the temperatures in North Dakota were warmer than the temperatures in the southeast. So that just gives you an idea of, actually this is a pretty good place to show it. Right there in South Dakota, you see a 54 degrees, and then down here in the southeast, you can find some 49s and 51s. That just shows that this area is below average, that area is well above average. So, and then one other thing to point out is how warm it remains down here in Arizona. So that's why we have that fire threat down there. It's because we're not getting that cold air like Southern California is. The temperatures there remaining pretty warm. So that's what's going on over the next 3 to 5 days if we want to look in the extended forecast. Something that I used to not do, but then as a little experiment, I kept looking at these every day for the last 2 weeks, and I've actually found they've been pretty accurate, at least in my experience so far. So I'm going to keep showing these in the videos because it is kind of nice to be able to get an idea of what kind of weather we can expect in the extended forecast, in the long range. So this is 8 to 14 days out. This is the averages expected for March 10th to March 16th, and it looks like there's a high probability that the entire western half of the country is going to be cold, and especially California, Oregon, and Nevada, while the entire eastern half of the country, there's a good chance we're going to be above average temperatures, and especially up here through the northeast, working all the way down into the southeast and the Midwest as well. It's almost a perfect split between the two, showing what kind of temperatures we can expect in the extended 2-week average. Cold in the west, warm in the east. Basically, you can sum it up with those few words right there. And then when it comes to precipitation, it looks like that's some great news for the Southwest. Again, this is right where I'll be showing that drought map over and over again throughout this video. That's where we can still have some extreme drought. So it's great to see that in the 8 to 14 day forecast, we're expected to get some precipitation. The Midwest is expected to get some precipitation as well. And it's interesting to almost combine these two. So we're expected precipitation and warm air up here in the Midwest. So I'm thinking that precipitation is going to be falling as rain and not as snow. We'll just have to see what happens, but I would say that's a pretty good bet right there. And then down here in California, it looks like we might continue to get some snow in the Sierras because we'll be mixing below average temperatures with some precipitation. Just a interesting way to combine those maps to see what kind of precipitation you could be getting. And then the 3-month forecast, there's some pretty clear differences. Actually, I want to do, the temperature one first. You got a little sneak peek at the precipitation right there. I clicked to the wrong tab. There's about 60 of them open right now. So looking at the 3-month temperature probability outlook, this looks a bit different than the outlook for the next 2 weeks. This shows almost the entire country is expected to be above average temperatures, and especially down here in the Southwest. From a fire perspective, which is almost the perspective I'm always looking at things in, that's not exactly what we want to see. That shows it's going to be warmer than average, which means it's probably going to be drier than average. So that's not exactly good news when it comes to the extended fire forecast and the drought in the Southwest. Even though we're getting some good precipitation over the next 2 weeks, it looks like on the 3-month average, it's going to be very warm. I just kind of combined two things there, but I was getting ahead of myself because I saw the sneak peek of this map as well. It's 3-month precipitation probability outlook. Looks like the Southwest is going to be dry. So we're going to be mixing warm temperatures with a lack of precipitation on average over the next 3 months. So, I mean, this is a climate forecast. They're subject to change just like the weather forecasts are. As of right now, this would be bad news for fire danger, but who knows? Maybe the model's wrong, and I actually kind of hope that it is. I certainly hope that it is. So we can also look at what's going on where we are expecting precipitation. Looks like on the 3-month average, we're expected to get some up here in Washington and the Midwest. Now, I would have to say that you might be wondering why this is in place and what the climatological models take into account. It's all those different teleconnections like El Nino and La Nina. So I think in the future, I might actually try to put together a full climate video that goes into what kind of patterns we have set in place and why this might be the case. And hopefully it's not, because I'm actually hoping for lots of precipitation, especially down here in California. So that's what's going on in the extended outlook. I think now we can actually start diving into what's going on right now. And the first one I want to dive into is that first system that's moving through right now, because that's what's affecting our weather and is the thing we should spend the most time on, because that's what actually is guaranteed to happen. Because the closer you are to an event happening, the more likely it is to happen. So pretty good chance, I would say guaranteed chance, that this low is in fact going to move through Southern California, bring some light rain. I was a little hesitant on saying this 3 days ago because of how shaky the models can be about those cutoff lows, but now it's close enough that I can fairly say this is going to happen. And just looking outside, it does look like stormier, more wintry conditions have returned to California. It's certainly cloudy, it's gotten colder, so I would say this is basically a guarantee at this point. So that's going to move through, and you'll notice it moves through Arizona as well, but kind of dodges the southern parts of Arizona, and that's going to affect the fire threat down there. But first I want to just look at the overall precipitation that we're expected to get. I don't think that's at the start. So right there, you can see it starting to creep onto the screen as that low moves in. We'll look at the exact timing in a second, but again, I'm happy to say it looks like, even though it's not all that much rain, we'll be bringing some rain to Southern California, and then it's quickly going to move into Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, bringing some light rain and snow to those states as well. And then it's going to continue to move off, bringing some snow to Colorado and New Mexico before basically disappearing into the Gulf of Mexico like we showed earlier. So looking at the precipitation, just clicking through, that's mostly going to be snowfall. We'll look at that in a second. Right here, we'll just focus on down in Southern California. Again, you can't get too excited with this storm. It's most of the I can't even really call them impacts, but most of the rainfall we're going to be getting is about 0.1 to 0.2 inches, spreading all the way down from Los Angeles to Southern California. But there is that bullseye in San Diego where we're expected to get a half an inch to an inch of rain. So that's certainly some good news there. One thing you'll notice though is that Arizona is almost completely left out on this map, or southern Arizona is almost completely left out even from the rainfall. So that's why we have that fire threat remaining in that state, and for a number of other reasons as well. So if we want to look at the snowfall that we're getting, actually that was a sneak peek of what's going on up there. We're just looking at the first system moving through right now. Looks like we can actually get a couple inches of snow down here in the Southern California mountains, and then for the most part 1 to 2 inches in Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and then maybe some bullseyes where we get 6 inches. For the most part, it's a pretty weak system. It's very light totals, both with rainfall and snowfall, no matter how you look at it. Now, the reason that snowfall is able to fall right there is because of those below average temperatures that we'll be looking at that will be moving into Southern California throughout the day today. And there's actually something pretty interesting going on with the temperatures throughout the day today in SoCal, so we'll take a closer look at that as well. So again, just showing the warnings map, this is the two big factors that are happening as that low moves through that we were just talking about. It's the winter storm watch or advisory down here in Southern California, and you can see that very southern parts of California are going to be getting those high winds as well, but they're also going to be getting some of that moisture and rainfall. Now here in here in Arizona, that's where, remember, we're missing out on a lot of that rainfall, not a lot of moisture, but we are getting the high winds. So that's why we have a fire threat there. And it's dry air, the fuels are extremely dry. We're going to look at all of that when we dive into that fire threat there. So how we think about this storm moving through really depends on the effects we're getting with it and really depends on the drought. So right here, this is showing the drought where you have this yellow color, that's moderate drought where let's make sure about that. That's abnormally dry. The orange is severe drought, the red is extreme drought, and that burgundy color is exceptional drought. I always think it's weird they call it exceptional drought because it makes it sound like a good thing, even though that's about as bad as it gets. You can see that the exceptional drought is down here in Arizona. It's actually worse than what's going on in most parts of California. Down here in Southern California, we're just abnormally dry. So that's maybe part of the reason that even though we're getting some of that high wind warning down here in very Southern California, that's possibly why we're not getting a red flag warning tacked onto that as well. Part of it, there's many, many different stories that go into what constitutes fire danger, and we're going to be looking at all of those throughout this video. And that's something I've been finding throughout my research, that there's no one simple factor. You can't say, oh, it's warm, so there's fire danger. No, there's warm air, there's winds, there's low humidity, the light fuels are dry, the heavy fuels are dry, there's a drought. So there's lots of different factors that come into play. So right there, I would say that's why in California and Southern California, with that system moving through, I'm mostly happy because it's going to be bringing some rainfall down to Southern California, and I'd say that's good news. Now for Arizona, I would say this same exact system has different results because of this exceptional drought that we have in place and because of the fire danger that it's going to be causing there. So it's the same system with two different results. One being good moisture for the drought, one being bad wind for the drought and fire danger. I probably spent way too long trying to explain that, but it's a clear difference. I just thought it was interesting that there's a clear difference in two different locations from the same storm coming through. So let's just look at the precipitation first. This is showing 10 a.m. today. You're going to start to feel some of that light rain move in all the way from Oxnard down to San Diego. And then one thing you'll notice is San Diego is the spot of this map that both gets the heaviest rainfall and is in the rainfall the longest. So looks like we're still getting rainfall for San Diego throughout this entire day, getting into 4 p.m. And then even into 10 p.m., we're still picking up some light rain in the very southern parts of California. So for that reason, San Diego, makes sense, is going to be the place that picks up the most rain with this system. Just 0.2 inches up here in Los Angeles, while San Diego will be between a half an inch to an inch, depending on exactly where you are. And again, it's not because there's any heavy rain coming in San Diego. It's more that that's where it's falling the longest. So that's where we can continue to pile up some rainfall right there. And then again, I just want to show when the storm is actually gone. 10 p.m. on Wednesday, and then it's gone. So it looks like it's a very quick storm, comes in 10 a.m., and then it's gone completely by 10 p.m. in San Diego. And then there's the totals again, just in case you missed it. Overall, not a very widespread storm. Overall, not huge rainfall totals. But again, we'll take what we can get because we are in a drought. And it has been quite some time since Southern California got a storm. So here's where things get kind of interesting. This is showing the temperatures at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. So right when the storm is just off the coast and just about to push in, you can see Los Angeles 55 degrees, San Diego 57 degrees. Then when we go to 4 p.m., which is typically when you see your daytime highs, you'll notice these temperatures actually went down. So in the morning, San Diego 57, Los Angeles 55. When at 4 p.m., when you typically have your daytime highs, San Diego 55, Los Angeles 52. And you can also see this blue color here, which represents where temperatures are actually going to be below freezing. So it might just be me that thinks this is all that interesting, but it seems weird that your daytime highs today are actually going to be in the morning, and then you're actually going to be getting colder throughout the day as that system pushes through. So again, that's causing a winter storm watch down here in Southern California, but for the most part, I would say that's some good news because it's going to bring some much needed rain. Now, again, where it's not exactly good news with this storm coming through is what's going on in Arizona, because we have a red flag warning and what the National Weather Service is calling a critical fire threat. So to explain this, we're actually going to start to go through all the different factors that are put into the systems to decide if there's a fire threat, what gives you an idea of fire danger. So the first thing we'll look at is just the precipitation that's going through Arizona, because this is part of the reason that it's a different factor than what's going on in SoCal. One, there's not very widespread rainfall. It's just the very central parts of this state at about 11 p.m. tonight. That's going to be getting some rain right there and also some snow where it's higher elevations. And then it's going to be moving off. You'll notice it's not very much and it's just a quick burst, and it's certainly not widespread. If we want to look at how much precipitation is actually being picked up, looks like about 0.1 to maybe 0.5 inches of precipitation just right here. But then down in the south and the southwest of Arizona, where actually the fire danger is the greatest, that's where we're barely getting any rain whatsoever. Now, when it comes to fire weather, if you watched all my fire weather forecast videos this last season, there were three weather factors I looked at every single time. There's temperature, winds, and humidity. So depending on those, it has a large impact on your fire danger. The first one, temperature, it's pretty self-explanatory. The warmer it is, the worse your fire danger is going to be. So let's look, as this system goes through, there's not that cool down that we were getting in Southern California. Remember in SoCal, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., it actually got colder. Throughout the day today, 11 a.m., it looks like it's already 71 degrees, 73 degrees, and then throughout the day, it's going to remain, if not the same, or possibly get even warmer. So we're not getting that cooling effect that we got down in SoCal. Again, part of the reason SoCal not in that fire threat, Arizona is. It's because the temperatures are remaining warm. Now, with that being said, obviously for Arizona, low to mid 70s is not by any means extreme. So this alone would not explain why we have fire danger. Now you have to add in the humidity factor. The reason humidity is so important is, for the most part, the effect it has on the fuels. So when your air is dry, your fuels get dry, at least the lighter fuels, and then it's much easier for those fuels to burn. If you've ever started a campfire, it pretty much makes sense that if you were starting your fire with a wet log or a dry log, it's much easier and it's going to burn much hotter and faster using that dry log. So when the air is dry, the vegetation gets dry and your fire danger increases. So right here, this is 5 a.m. Wednesday. You can see even this early in the morning, we have humidities below 30%. Then as we get into 11 a.m., it looks like we're dropping into some humidities in the 20 to 15% range. And then as we get into the afternoon, it actually appears that the dry air is going to be easing up a little bit. So that right there, I'm tempted to say it's good news, but it's actually not actually that great of news, because the effect that moisture, that humidity has on fuels is a relatively slow process. So that right there, the fact that all day today and yesterday were both dry, the short range fuels are going to be dried out, which I'll actually show you in a second. Now this is actually the biggest factor. So the temperatures in the 70s, that is slight cause for concern. The humidity in the 10% range, that's certainly going to dry out some of your lighter fuels. But the wind factor, I think, is actually the biggest part of this story. You can see at 5 a.m. Wednesday, this is showing wind gusts just around 10 to 15 miles per hour. Then as we get into 11 a.m. Wednesday, as that system is pushing through, then we start to get to 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts. Then as we get into 5 p.m., we're looking at 35 to even 55 mile per hour wind gusts, and especially down here in the southern parts of the state. So that's a key spot to look at. That's where, 1, we weren't getting any rainfall. 2, it's the warmest. 3, that's where a lot of that dry air was. And 4, that's where we're getting some 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. So I would say the transition there was almost in escalation. Temperatures were not that bad. Humidity looking dry, and then winds looking rather extreme. As you get into 50 mile per hour wind gusts, that's where fire danger can get pretty serious. And the reason for that, so temperature, pretty self-explanatory for its effect on fire danger. Relative humidity, because of how it dries out the fuels. Winds are bad for a number of reasons. One, it can actually push oxygen into the fire. If you've ever breathed on a fire, that's basically what you're doing to make it grow. 2, it can actually pick up burning embers, toss them ahead of the fire, and start new little fires. It's called spotting. And then 3, it can also tilt the flames over and preheat some of the fuels in front of the fire so that they're more ready for ignition by the time the blaze gets there. So winds have all kinds of effects on fire. And if you're interested in that, I'm actually going to be doing a wildfire video later today where we go into some of the wildfire things that I'm talking about right now. This is almost a little practice for that wildfire explained video later today. So those are all the weather factors, the temperature, winds, and humidity. But then you also have to take into account the fuel factors. And the best way to do this is thinking about it in how large the fuels are. So you have 10-hour fuels, 100-hour fuels, and 1,000-hour fuels. The 10-hour fuels are your very light fuels. You can think of this like little twigs or pine needles, things that are very, very light and could be changed in only 10 hours by the moisture in the air. So you think of that, it kind of makes sense. The smaller and thinner something is, the more it's going to fluctuate with the air around it, because a larger portion of it is surface area that interacts with that atmosphere around it. So when it comes to the 10-hour fuels, you can see that right there in Arizona, that's where we're extremely dry. That's 1 to 2% fuel moisture content. So how much water is in the fuels? That's almost about as dry as you can get down there in southern Arizona. And you can see that in this one little spot in Nevada here are the driest places in the country when it comes to those lighter fuels. And again, these get affected over a 10-hour span. So that's responding to some of the warm air we've had over the last 10 hours right there. If you want to see the opposite example of this, you can see there in Georgia and South Carolina where we've had all that moisture and rainfall. That's where your fuels are extremely moist because they've been responding to that storm. Here in Arizona, though, those light fuels extremely dry. And these are the fuels that typically will start a fire. Because if you think of like grasses or anything of that nature, that's where a little tiny spark can get into these fuels and get a fire going. Now, when you get to the 100-hour fuels, you can think of that as branches about the size of your wrist. And you can see that these are extremely dry here in southern Arizona as well. Less than 5% fuel moisture. And as you can see, again, the driest place in the entire country. So we're mixing that warm air, that low relative humidity, and the extreme winds with the driest place in the country. And then it's also true for the 1,000-hour fuels. This shows basically big fuels. It takes 1,000 hours for them to respond to the moisture that's in the air. And right there in southern Arizona, again, right where we have that fire threat, again, we're seeing it's one of the driest places in the entire country. So across the board, whether you're talking about little grasses, little branches, or full-on trees, it looks like this area is extremely dry. To sum up everything I've been saying, if you take nothing else from it, the fuels are very dry in Arizona. And then we're mixing it with temperatures in the 70s, relative humidity around getting as low as 10%, and then winds gusting 50 miles per hour. The other thing that gets inputted into these fire danger models is the drought. And I've already shown this, but just to show it again, it's exactly in that southern part of Arizona again, where it's in extreme to exceptional drought. So it's almost every single factor that gets inputted into the fire model is all aligning for this part of Arizona where we have the fire threat. So the scientists take all of these factors into account and put out a fire danger forecast. And you can see right where we've been talking about and focusing on, where it's the warmest, the driest, the windiest, where the fuels are the driest, both the light fuels and the heavy fuels, and where the drought is the driest. That's where we have this very high to extreme fire danger down here in Arizona. So this might have even been more of a little wildfire explained video than a forecast today, but it's always interesting and important to be able to apply some of these concepts and actually see exactly how they are applied and play out to create a fire danger forecast. So that's what's going on down there in Arizona. Once again, I'll just show, before I move on, I'll show the warnings map again. Again, in Southern California, we got that winter storm warning or advisory or watch, but it's going to be bringing some nice rain, especially down into SoCal, mixed with some winds down there. But again, that's where we're getting some cooler temperatures, and the fuels aren't as dry. They are dry, and we are still in abnormally dry conditions down here, but certainly not like we're seeing in Arizona. That's where we have the fire threat. That's where there's this red flag warning, because it's dry, windy, and extreme drought, and very dry fuels right there. So that's basically what's going on with that first system. Two different responses depending on whether you're in SoCal or in Arizona. If you're in SoCal, you could look forward to the rain. If you're in Arizona, you might want to keep your eye out on the fire danger forecast and stay updated with your local resources. And maybe don't start any campfires anytime soon. Okay, moving on. Looking at the forecast in the extended outlook. What's going to happen after this first system moves through? So that's what we were just following. Now let's follow the systems that are following behind that one. So we'll start here, looking at this trough, moving in right there. That's going to start to push into Washington, Oregon, and California sometime Friday into Saturday. And it's right about here that we start to see a major difference from what the models were showing yesterday. Yesterday at this point, you can go back in my forecast yesterday if you want to see it, but this trough right here broke in two. Half of it went up into Canada, and majority of Washington and Oregon were missing out of this. Just the coasts were getting some heavy rain, and it was breaking up into Canada. The other half was turning into another little cutoff low and hitting central and southern California, bringing more rain from San Luis Obispo down to San Diego. Now, as we click through, you can see that trough is staying intact, and it looks like now it's mostly going to be hitting Oregon and Northern California and missing Southern California completely. So, very interesting to see how that forecast has changed there. And then behind that one, we have what looks to be the biggest of the three storms going into California. This one looks like it's digging all the way down, and then right there is where I'm expecting we'll get some heavier winds, maybe some heavy rainfall, some heavy snowfall in the Sierras. So that's going to be the key one we're watching for California and Oregon, and that's around this time next week, maybe next Tuesday and Wednesday. And then, not to get your hopes up, but there actually looks to be another little system following in behind that one, where we might even get more rain after that. So, number of storms going through California, all good news there. So, that almost matches perfectly with what yesterday's model was showing. It showed that the second system, I'll back it up just in case you missed it, second system comes in and brings some heavy rain to the Washington, Oregon, and very northern California coast. Now yesterday, this is where that part of the upper system breaks off into Canada. And then this part goes off into the Pacific and then comes back in to central and southern California. So here is where you'll see the difference. It just continues, it sits along the coast, continuing to bring heavy rain to the coast, and then it's not going to break off and go into SoCal. It's just going to move right through Northern California, actually bringing what looks to be some heavy snowfall to the Sierras. So we'll have to take a look at the snowfall forecast there. But first, I want to look up into the northwest. We'll take a very close eye on California itself in a second. Right now, let's just look at the other states up here in the Northwest to see what's happening. Looks like the system comes in Thursday night into early Friday morning is when we start to get light rain along the coast. And then as we get into Friday, that's when we start to pick up that heavy rain along the coast. That's going to continue. And then this is different from yesterday. Yesterday, half of it broke up, half of it went down, and the central parts of Oregon and eastern parts of Washington and Idaho and Montana weren't getting any of this storm. Now you can see it's actually going to be moving through and bringing that rain and snow along with it. So where all these states were missing out in yesterday's forecast, looks like they're now set to get at least some light rain and snow. Again, I don't think it's going to be a major storm by any standards. The trough itself doesn't look all that large, but it's certainly interesting because of how much it has changed since yesterday's forecast. And there are some areas that will be picking up some large rainfall accumulations and some large snowfall accumulations as well. So here is where this second system starts to come in. It's the first traces might actually start to appear as soon as Monday, but you can see how different it is from the first one that comes in. This one is more down here in California. Washington almost completely missing out, and then the heaviest snowfall down here in California and parts of Oregon as well, before spreading out and giving rain and snow to Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Utah, basically everybody. And then that's just going to continue. It almost comes through in two different pulses, continuing to bring heavy rain and snow to especially the coast of Oregon and California for that rain, and then in your higher elevations like the Cascades or the Sierras, that's where you're getting the snow. So we'll click through and just look at that precipitation as it starts to pile in. That, I believe, is the first system there. That, or technically the second one in the grand scheme of this forecast. But the first system to go through Washington and Oregon looks like there's places along the coast that are getting up to 2 to 3 inches of rain. And then with the second system, the one that's coming in at the start of next week, that's where our totals, especially down here in southwestern Oregon, could get to 4 to 5 inches of rain. And then widespread areas along the coast are in that 2 to 4 inch range. And again, you'll notice that a lot of that precipitation was just sitting along the coast for large periods of time. So that's why the accumulations are so great there, while when you get inland, a lot of that moisture has already been squeezed out over the coast. So by the time you get to eastern Washington or eastern Oregon, you're looking at maybe 0.1 to 0.3 inches. And then a similar story for the rest of the Northwest. Just 0.1 to 0.2 inches of rain if it's falling as rain. If it's not falling as rain, that means it's falling as snow. So we could take a look at that as well. There's the first system. It's actually showing up as more snow for Washington than was originally forecasted, and that's because it's moving through instead of jumping up above it. So we're actually going to have some places in Washington picking up over a foot of snow, possibly even 2 feet in this one little bullseye right there. And then we'll look at the California forecast in a second, but you can see also totals above 6 to 8 inches in Oregon with that first one. Then with the second one, you'll notice it's mostly down here in California. We didn't add all that much onto the Washington totals, but then very southwestern parts of Oregon and in the Cascades of Oregon picked up a few more inches there, getting their grand totals over a foot with these two systems. So clearly the spot that we need to focus on in the very northwest is Oregon. That looks where we're getting the heaviest rain and we're getting the heaviest snow. So we'll look at the Oregon for the local map. But first, just to take a wide look at these systems as they go through again. There is this first one we're talking about as it goes through Saturday and Sunday, mostly through California, but Oregon getting it as well. And then there is the second system. Again, mostly through California, but Oregon getting it as well. So if we actually want to look at the local map, zooming into Oregon, rain starts to show up 10 a.m. on Thursday. You can see it right off the coast. And then you'll notice how long the coast of Oregon stays in either light to even heavy rainfall at some times. Where you see the yellow and orange color, that's where we're getting into some heavy rainfall. And then you can also see some of that snow piling into the Cascades as well. So that's all the way into Saturday at 10 a.m. It looks like that's when that first system has moved on out. So Thursday at 10 a.m. to Saturday at 10 a.m. looks like constant rain and snow, especially for the western parts of Oregon. Then here is where the second system starts to show up, and you'll notice it's relatively scattered. So there's no clear spot where you can just say, oh, that's the system moving in it. And that's because the bulk of it is moving in down in California. But it looks like around Monday at 4 a.m. we start to get some of that light rain and snow, and that's just going to continue throughout Tuesday. Into Wednesday, it turns into some heavier rain and snow, and then it looks like it just continues on and on after that. So overall, if we look at the precipitation with the first system, that's where our coastline there, if you look down on this color bar, that's where you're in 2-inch range right there by Sunday with that first system. If we look at the next one, which should be over by about Friday, that's where your totals along the coast are 4 to 5 inches. Widespread areas are 1 to 3 inches of rain, and then the eastern parts of the state barely even getting any rain at all. It's interesting to see what a contrast it is between the coast here and the eastern part of Oregon. We go from 5 inches of rain to 0.1 inches of rain right there. And then when it comes to the snow, there's the first system. Looks like we're getting 8 to 10 inches in the Cascades of Oregon. And then with the second system, that's where our totals can get over a foot, possibly even 1.5 feet. If you're in this one select little bullseye, that's where you could be getting into the 2-foot range. So that's what's going on in Oregon. Let's back out, and now let's focus on California. So we already focused on that first one, bringing the rain to Southern California. Now let's look at the second one, the one that's much different from the forecast models yesterday, no longer breaking off into a little low and hitting SoCal. Now that trough is mostly moving through Northern California here. And then similar story for the one following behind it, but this one actually looks even bigger. So the second system right there, that was supposed to turn into a cutoff low, but now isn't, that looks to be coming in Friday and Saturday. We'll check out the exact timing in a second. The second one looks to be set to come in Monday and Tuesday, and looks to be the biggest of all 3 systems that we've been talking about throughout this forecast today. So again, there's that first system going through SoCal. We already talked plenty about that one. Here's the second system. We start to see that rainfall come in. Starts just as heavy rain in very northern California. And then this is where, that's almost exactly what the model was looking like yesterday. Right further on from this is where things start to change. Yesterday, Northern California, that was the most we were getting. The Sierras were barely getting any snow. Bay Area was almost missing out completely. And then now, and because it had that cutoff low forming and then moving into Central and SoCal. Now watch as I click through, we're getting that heavy rain building into the Bay Area, and then very heavy snowfall building into the Sierras. That's about 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. And it's just amazing how much a forecast model can change in one day. This is why at the beginning of my videos, I always say, double check and make sure this is my most recent forecast, because they change. You can see how much this changed since yesterday. Yesterday, Bay Area was not getting any rain. Now it looks like we're getting heavy rain. And this is again for Saturday. The Sierras were getting maybe an inch of snow. Now it looks like there's some heavy snow pushing in. Yesterday, SoCal was getting some more rain with this system, even some light snow in the very southern California mountains. Now it looks like they're almost missing out completely. So if we actually, and before we move on to the precipitation totals, let's take a look at the next system to go through. So let's just back it up, make sure we're in the right place here. There's the first one going through SoCal. There's the second one now going through NorCal, big change in the forecast. And then here is the third one that looks to be moving in right, it almost looks like it's directly going into about Monterey Bay into Big Sur, which is typically where we're going to get our heaviest rain as that moves in Monday and Tuesday. But again, that's a ways off in the forecast, so we'll actually have to see if that ends up happening. If it is anything like how big of a change has happened in the last 24 hours, Guarantee that's changing as well. As of right now, though, looks like that third system, which I think will be the biggest of the three, is going to bring widespread rain to almost all of California and then widespread snow as well. So each system is different, and that's why it's interesting to look at each one separately. So that next system, like I said, that's the biggest of the three. Looks like it's going to continue all the way into next Thursday after coming in on Monday. So just to look at each system, it's interesting to see how different they all are. This one is a cutoff low, brings some light rain to very southern California. The next one is a small trough, just dipping down and quickly bringing some heavy rain and heavy snow to the very northern parts of California. The next one is a larger trough that seems to just sit over California for a number of days, all the way from Monday into what looks like Thursday. It just sits over California, bringing widespread rain and snow to everybody. So 3 different systems, 3 different things going on. We'll have to continue to follow that to see if all of those things actually end up happening. Looking at the precip we're expected to get, again, that's with the first system. Not all that much, 0.1 to 0.2 inches, especially if you're up near Los Angeles. Down in San Diego, could be getting 0.7 inches of rain. Now, as that second system goes through, notice the difference. Yesterday, it was only bringing rain to Central Coast and SoCal. Now, it looks like the farthest it stretches down is possibly getting down into San Luis Obispo, where I did my undergrad at Cal Poly. That's why I always mention San Luis Obispo, if you've ever noticed that in my forecast. So now, big change. SoCal missing out on that second system as it goes through, but the northern parts of California getting some heavy rain. That's some 1 to 3 inches up there, stretching down, and Bay Area getting possibly up to an inch of rain in the North Bay as well. Then with the third system, remember, that's the one that's much more widespread. That's going to bring totals to almost everybody. At this point, by around this time next week, or Thursday next week, that's where northern parts of California look to be about 2 to 4 inches of rain. Central parts of California, especially along the coast, look to be about 1 inch of rain. And then actually Southern California coast looks to be around one inch of rain as well. And then if we look at the snowfall, yep, I do have the map there. Again, that first system actually bringing an inch or 2 of snow to Southern California. Nothing to get too excited about. Big change in the forecast where we were getting maybe an inch in yesterday's model. Now it looks like we're getting 6 to 8 to maybe even a foot of 6 to 8 inches, possibly a foot of snow. And then with the next one, that's where our totals by this time next week look to be over 2 feet of snow. It's just crazy to see how much this forecast has changed since yesterday. Yesterday it looked like the Sierras was set to get maybe an inch or 2 inches of snow. All my friends who snowboard were kind of bummed. Now it looks like by this time next week, we could be getting 2 to 3 feet of snow. So we'll just have to stay updated because it certainly changes fast. Let's just look at the exact timing of this. Looks like 10 p.m. Thursday to 4 a.m. Friday is when that first system starts to bring some heavy rain to the coast in Northern California. Then that's going to continue to move through, bring some heavy rain to the Bay Area by 10 p.m. on Friday, and some heavier snowfall up to northern parts of California. At 4 a.m. on Saturday, you can see the system has already shifted through California. 4 a.m. Saturday, a lot of the coast is now out of this system, but we're getting very heavy snowfall up in the Sierras. That's over 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. So that one's gone, and it is a quick mover. If we want to look at the exact timings, that's about 10 p.m. Thursday to about 10 a.m. Saturday. Pretty quick mover, but we are going to get some relatively large totals because of some of that heavy rain and heavy snowfall that's associated with it. So around 10 a.m. Monday is where we start to get the first little traces of that light rain and snow with this second system. And then that's, again, widespread impacts all through Monday, throughout Tuesday, throughout Thursday, throughout Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then it looks to be gone as we get into 4 p.m. on Thursday. So there weren't really any periods in that last system where it looked like there was extremely heavy rain or extremely heavy snowfall. But you'll notice it comes in Monday and it's not gone till Thursday. So that's why, and it's very widespread, which is why I think the third system is going to be the largest of the three, bringing the most totals to the most people. If we look at the precip as it comes in, there's the first system, bringing 1 to 2 inches up here in NorCal, 0.5 inches to San Francisco, and then it almost cuts off right as you get into Monterey Bay. Southern California looks like we're missing out on this second system. Then as we click through to look at the third one, as we get into Thursday, at that point, parts of NorCal have picked up 4 to 5 inches of rain, and your totals around the Bay Area are around 1.5 inches to maybe even 2 inches. Looks like the Santa Cruz Mountains there could be getting 2 to 3 inches of rain, which is great because much of this area is still at a large rainfall deficit. And I've shown the drought map about 5 times throughout this video. Almost this entire area is in some kind of drought. And then if we look at the snowfall, this is something that has changed massively since yesterday's forecast. Now instead of 1 to 2 inches of snow, now we're looking like over a foot with just that first system that's going through NorCal alone. And then with the second system, that's where our totals throughout NorCal and in the Sierras can get to 2 to possibly even 3 feet by this time next week. But again, forecast models certainly change very fast, as we've seen from yesterday's forecast to today's, so we'll have to keep our eye on that system to see if it actually happens. So just taking a broad view of everything we've talked about today. 1, we've got that system going through Southern California, bringing that rain to parts of Los Angeles down to San Diego, mostly down into San Diego, where we're getting 0.5 inch to 1 inch of rain. And then that same system is bringing some actually dry air and some extreme wind gusts of 45 to 55 miles per hour into Arizona, and actually creating a fire threat. It's mixing warm temperatures, low humidity, extreme wind gusts with extremely dry fuels right here in Arizona, and that's what's causing a fire threat down there. That low pressure system, good for SoCal, not good for Arizona. Then we're also following the second system coming through. Big change in the forecast. Now it looks like it's actually going to be bringing heavy rain and snow to Washington, Oregon, very northern parts of California, and then moving through before the next one comes in behind it and brings widespread rain and snow to almost all of California starting Monday next week all the way through Thursday next week. That's going to be a fun one to watch because it looks like it's going to be bringing weather and rain and much needed precipitation to almost all of California with that as it comes through. So just one last glimpse at the warnings map right there. Down in SoCal where we're getting that rain, we have the winter storm watch, and then we also have high wind warnings down here in San Diego, but not a fire danger threat like we're seeing in Arizona, because down here in San Diego, the fuels are abnormally dry, but as the storm moves in, it's bringing in some cool temperatures with it. In Arizona, it's not bringing those cool temperatures. That's where the temperatures are going to be warm. We have humidity down at 10%, wind gusts 45 to 55 miles per hour, extremely dry fuels, and what's considered extreme fire danger threats. So right there, that's I think the top story and the concern for the forecast of what's going on down there in Arizona. I'll certainly keep my eye on it, and we certainly hope that all is well. So I guess one last parting thing is there's a lot of uncertainty in the forecast ahead, so if you want to stay updated, you can subscribe to this channel where I do these forecasts every single day. Hope everybody has a great day, and thanks for watching.